Physical features are part of the economics. And here the question becomes, you know, things that are in the way. Is it worth it to move them or cut them down or eliminate them? And we start looking at the initial cost of things like, and I'll go right to center pivots because we look at really the real problems come mainly with things like center pivots and interferences that would occur, like a building in the way. Is it worth it to move the building or destroy the building to put a center pivot in that piece of property? That's something that has to be looked at. How about a road? Can we move a road that might make the pivot irrigate a much bigger area? Would that be an economical choice, or would we be better off to put in a couple of smaller pivots or a part circle pivot? Those become options oftentimes with the designer and the owner. Power lines that are in the way. And see, power lines would interfere with things like wheel lines as well. What are we going to do about a power line in the field? You know, it can be moved. Well, what's the expense of moving the power line? That's another situation where you may end up having to pay the power company quite a bit of money just to move the location of it. Or put it buried underground, which is going to be an expense you probably will incur as the landowner when you do that. Other things like trees that might be in the field that might have to be cut down. Maybe you have outcroppings. Well, I've seen some pivots put in some terrible rough terrain where they've had to go in and literally knock off the tops of knobs in a field so that the towers don't hang up. As they come around, there will be little hillocks out through the field, and the trussing would actually get hung up on the pivot structure. Now, this is generally in more scabby ground where they might just be growing pasture or some forage crops. But I've seen it in some areas like along the Snake River breaks where there can be 100 really good acres and 25 acres of rock outcroppings scattered throughout a field. And they go in and they'll literally blast the tops of those rock outcroppings to get them out of the way. And it's worth it to them to do that. And you just drive up the Clotis Highway, you can see where that's been done in a few places. From Pasco to the town of Clotis. Other physical features that would affect, trying to think, pivots, it really comes to mind because there's so many things that can interfere. When you get into solid set, you can usually work your way around most anything. And so any turf system, you're going to be able to work your way around most anything. One thing that does come into mind is a cemetery. Now, I just designed the cemetery this last year. Now, you got all kinds of interferences in a cemetery. You talk about a nightmare of interferences, and you talk about adding to the expense of a system. We went out here and looked at the Walla Walla Cemetery, Blue Mountain Cemetery, out at the end of 2nd Street. There's like 600 and some trees to begin with on 60 acres. Over 10 trees to the acre. There are who knows how many tombstones that are taller than 2 feet high. Every one of those is just like an instant barricade for a sprinkler shooting at it. And they're scattered all over the place. There's no continuity to where the big stones are. So what you have to do, and then streets, you got a little paved street every 600 feet on a grid just about. And so you try to minimize the street cuts. You try to make sure that the trees don't interfere with any sprinkler, so they're not blocking any of the spray. And then you have to make sure that the big tombstones aren't blocking any of the spray either. So then you have to go in, and then you want all of these to be pop-ups so that they're out of sight, out of mind when the crew mows every week. Now that's a challenge. And I mean to tell you, there is pipe going every which way. But then where can you put the pipe? Well, you got to go very carefully. You put the pipe. That's right. Right between the graves, and there, you know, there's gaps like this wide. So you can put 1-inch pipe. You can put about anywhere. You can find slits out through between the graves, and then they do have rows that are, you know, maintenance rows across sequentially across these blocks. Thank goodness that there are like 8-foot wide gaps that you can put your sub-main lines down and then work off of them with your little laterals. And it becomes, you talk about a physical feature nightmare, that's it. That is really a dandy. And it took way longer to map it than to design it. And we had GPS map, we had aerials that were scaled when the trees had lost their leaves. We knew exactly where every tree was. We could see all the grave markers. We had absolutely perfect scale with topog and scale on the GPS satellite mapping on it. I mean, we had the best maps available, and boy, you should see the zigzag of piping that goes into the thing.
Is it finished?
Yeah, it's done. I haven't seen the finished product. In fact, I just got a call, and as soon as next week's done, we're going to go over the final draft of it. And I'll bring it in and share it with you guys next quarter, because it's quite an operation. It's the toughest turf design I've ever done, by far. 60 acres seems like it took me about 100 hours, somewhere in that neighborhood. No, it's a little more than that. Yeah, it's about 100 hours of design time to do that.
$100 an hour.
I wished. That'd be nice. I was paid okay. It was okay. I usually don't work for free. But, yeah. So you can think of physical interferences when you're looking at placement, you know, of all you get into turf, and boy, you got to really worry about the landscape. You know, trees are your worst enemy, and then buildings jump in there and stuff starts getting in your way. So, well, you don't remove a tree in a landscape, you'll get killed usually.
Be buried